Welcome to another episode of The Architecture of Health. I'm the host, producer, the only one here today, Deb Voisin. And the reason for this episode is I needed to describe how I accidentally got rid of reading glasses. Yes, dozens of pairs, my progressives, all the different levels and styles I've used on and off over 20 years. It happened accidentally, and I'm not saying I won't need them ever again because the mechanism, I'm still testing this mechanism that seemed to have made this change. But the reason I'm making an episode about it is it was completely unexpected. The diet change I made was the exact opposite of what I thought would improve my eye health. So I had to document it here because, guys, we know we want nuance here. And one reason I didn't make much of a big deal about this on social media is it would become an anti blah blah campaign or a pro blah blah campaign. I'd rather us use this as a chance to understand the systems and our environments and the nuances of choice. And in particular, what happened is I changed my diet, and within about 3 days of only having a very simplified diet, one could argue that it's an elimination diet. I did elimination diets when my son had more, pretty severe symptoms of neurological things. So I was familiar with this idea, but it took reading an 87-page paper by a social media influencer on vitamin A for me to even consider an experiment to find out if I wasn't ingesting harmful levels. So I basically started this diet. I only ate ground beef and rice for 3 days, 3 meals a day, 3 days. The third day, I picked up my reading glasses to read. And then I was looking at the text and it looked like water. It looked so blurry. I was like, whoa, this diet is ruining me. This is terrible. Oh, I'm lacking vitamin A. My eyes need vitamin A. And then I took off the glasses and the text was crisp. So I don't want you to jump into some weird bandwagony thing right now because there's nuance. The reason someone like me, besides being a constant curious experimenter, the reason someone like me would be a candidate for considering my levels of vitamin A is because A, I got all gung ho with animal products with Weston Price. B, I got all gung ho with liver and oyster, shellfish and all sorts of things on the Ray Peat diet, carrots. And I was kind of living in those worlds. And then C, I got skeptical of fiber because Ray Peat people are very discerning on which fibers they ingest. The lectin, or is it lecithin, whatever, that crowd that's all plants have anti-nutrients. So I was in this perfect storm. But even more importantly, I had symptoms that would merit trying this hard. The symptoms I had was a dry eye disease. And guys, if my mom hadn't had both of her corneas replaced, and if my brother hadn't had both of his corneas replaced at my age, I'm 59. If their dry eye disease hadn't already resulted in surgical interventions, I'm not sure that I would have even cared about whether I had reading glasses or not. But an ophthalmologist, was it 10 years ago, had seen my my cornea, and was like, yeah, that's coming. You're on the way. That's headed your way. So I never associated that dry eye syndrome, Fuchs disease. I never associated that with my reading blurriness and my night vision and all that. In fact, I had believed myths about vitamin A being carrots are so good for your eyes that you need carrots for your vision to get better. So I was definitely not in this realm. And this article, and I'll put Mo Magnuson, I think I'm saying his name correctly, I'll put his references, his Patreon channel, in the notes below. That's where I got this 87-page paper, which is a summation of several other controversial health researchers. So here's the thing: vitamin A. Oh, it's so good for your eyes. You need it for da 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 da. So it turns out when I went a little bit deeper with my research, and of course, I love the internet. I love some of the AI research tools. When you look at vitamin A deficiency, it occurs in less than 1% of people. Most of us are fine. In fact, we're getting bombarded with it. If you ever eat low-fat dairy, it's fortified with vitamin A. We're getting bombarded in modern industrial culture with things that are, quote, fortified that were maybe designed for a time when it was very hard to be nourished. I would argue that most of us are more at risk of being overnourished than undernourished. And in fact, here's something funny. A friend sent me a reference about how this whole myth that carrots are good for your eyes and they're good for night blindness, that it was actually part of some sort of misinformation campaign way back in some kind of war day, because too much vitamin A is actually bad for your eyes. So what am I saying? Well, my particular case was more extreme than most people's because I not only was having raw dairy products, I was not only having pastured butter, pastured meat, liver pate every week, but I started stacking these other vitamins. I was almost the only vegetable I was eating was carrots, right? And I was stacking these other vitamins. I didn't know several of them also had synthetic vitamin A. And then I did something really, extreme. I started to put retinols, which is retinoic acid retinols. These are even more, they have even more impact in the same direction as food vitamin A. These other, like Accutane is an acne product. It has some of the same toxic effects when you have too much of it as these others do on our immune processes. I'm getting a little in the weeds here, but so what really interested me, what finally got me to read this 87-page paper, because guys, there's just too much good content on the internet that's succinct for me to want to sit down and read an 87-page paper. But what happened is someone I knew who had been really into the Ray Peat diet and the metabolic eating and Weston Price, she cautioned me when I even added to my stack desiccated liver. I was trying even harder for fear of not getting enough minerals. I was stacking so deep, and all these independent food sources didn't know about each other. And I didn't even know what I was eating that was vitamin A fortified, or which of these anti-aging supplements, how many ways I was stacking across multiple intake methods, right? I didn't have any idea. And the funny thing is I've used reading glasses now for 20 years, but I've also known about a lot of these ancestral ways of eating for 20 years. So why did I say this? So fat soluble vitamins are harder to detox. They have to go through your bile. So this paper that Mo put together describes how the bile that is your liver, the gallbladder is over there. I think it's just squirting this bile out. It's an important part of being able to digest our food and excrete toxins that are collected. We're supposed to be able to excrete that bile, and then the fiber absorbs it and we poop it out. Unlike the ones that aren't fat soluble, they have a different excretion pathway, right? Like you can pee some things out, like those expensive vitamins, most of them we're peeing out, right? And this paper had these interesting ways of setting the frame. Duration paradox. Sometimes just changing for 2 weeks gives you an upside, but after that, you can be much worse. There's also, the author pointed out that when you start dumping the overaccumulation of vitamin A, it's, if you don't excrete it, then you reabsorb it. And so I started to understand, wow, I've been overnourishing and not excreting enough of the overage. And one other thing, now this is controversial. I'm not saying everything is true. Guys, it's the internet. Go read the 87-page paper, fact check it across your other sources. But the interesting hypothesis in the paper, and I think it was Grant Genero that did the first, kind of started thinking in this direction. He had chronic psoriasis and other autoimmune inflammatory conditions. And when he did this elimination diet, I think he just had bison and white rice for a while. He got rid of all of his health conditions, and he pointed to cases where prisoners who were only eating white rice, even though they didn't have any vitamin A at all, their eyes were shiny and moist. So I was like, okay, I'm going to consider this, but I don't want to fall into some deep rabbit hole where I throw off something else. So one of the theories, and of course, none of this is proven, one of the theories is that when our immune systems are used to mounting these huge defenses when we live in unsanitary conditions, back before we all were inoculated against measles and all these other things, people would mount these large immune system defenses against intrusions. And it's like having extra gunpowder sitting around, and you have this powder keg versus having little firecrackers go off once in a while. And that the hypothesis is that in a sanitized modern culture where we have plenty of nourishment, there's a possibility of having too much vitamin A because you are not using it as often when we're not mounting fevers and our immune system isn't like doing this heavy duty workout. Now, guys, I'm simplifying. I'm just trying to think of just how can we look around this topic of whether we're undernourished or overnourished, right? So, and when we think about things like alternative ways of thinking, often something really bad already happened. That's why we have these awakenings. So we already have some kind of predisposition, right? Some kind of chink in our armor. So don't go crazy. I'm not anti-Weston Price. Well, and I want you to think about what this paper proposes. The paper also proposes that when Weston Price, this famous dentist who went around the world and found facial structures that when people were nasal breathers and they had whole food diets where they chewed, that tooth decay and other modern diseases just didn't exist. And the thought then being when we started to get more refined sugars and less whole ancestral nutrient dense food, that's when our facial structure started to collapse and we started to be mouth breathers, and therefore people started pulling teeth instead of keeping the nice wide airway. Now, I definitely observe that this is true, that we need a nice wide airway. We need our tongue resting to spot. Our babies need to be trained to be nasal breathers. That is totally mechanically 100% true. But what this paper poses is, but you will see facial deformations even in the animal kingdom when the animal didn't change to processed food diet. They didn't start eating sugar or whatever the diet changes, but the generation's facial deformations start in when there's been a toxic exposure. So we need to think through, like, okay, maybe there are more variables here than we thought. I could be undernourished. I could be overnourished. Now, am I saying ditch any of these? I'm not saying quit liver. I'm not saying quit carrots. I'm saying someone like me with a history of dry eye disease and a family history of Parkinson's and rheumatoid arthritis and autoimmune disease and all these things, someone like me, and who had a son with all sorts of crazy stuff, someone like me needs to make sure that my body's excretion pathways are open, that I have plenty of both soluble and insoluble fiber to help evacuate my bowels so that my liver, when it dumps the excess, it can be taken away. I also need to follow the liver's hierarchy of what will let it keep processing and releasing toxins. Like the liver stores the excess toxic vitamin A until it's time to dump. And now, again, I'm oversimplifying on purpose so that you go do your own research. But when I started to think about all this, I'm like, oh, yeah, exposing myself to more and more vitamin A is going to fill this backlog in my filtration system that I don't have any extra room. Other people probably do. You're probably not some nut job that stopped eating apples, right? I'm a nut job. So what's actionable here? One is if you want to dig into this topic because you're a passionate researcher like me, you want a different point of view about what is causing these modern diseases. I honestly think glyphosate, and it's a much bigger, I think that's a biggie. The antibiotic laden food chain, the glyphosate, the GMO, I think that's the most disruptive thing we have in terms of our nutrition because our gut isn't able to process things. But on the other side, we have people like me that fall into the camp of trying way too hard and we're way too easy for people to market some sexy idea to, even if it's trapped, if it's in the cloaked or the visage, the costume, the appearance of being ancestral first. I realized, wow, I know my mom ate chicken livers because she grew up on a farm, but how often would you be doing that? You wouldn't be doing that every day. And even people in France, when the family has pate, it's not every day. So as Americans, we have this disease of abundance. We could eat whatever thing we're attracted to all the time, whether it makes sense in the greater scheme of things. And guys, I'm not criticizing those nose to tail people. Part of the problem here, I wasn't eating the nose or the tail. I was just heading straight for the liver. So what's actionable? Okay, go check out Mo's Patreon channel or look up the work of Grant Genero. I'll reference him below. And if you have any sort of chronic thing, psoriasis, eczema, autoimmune disease, I think maybe even chronic fatigue, maybe even he has a list of these kind of modern chronic autoimmune conditions too. There's a huge list. If you have anything like that going on, it's just not working. You're trying harder and harder. You're doing your greens and you're putting your supplements. You're not eating this. You are eating that. I would go check out this paper or just try for 3 days to a week a brief elimination diet that is only rice and bison or beef. That's what I did. With I used a little bit of flavoring, salt, pepper. Yeah, I used some. But then here's the other thing. Some of us are going to be way more toxic than others. Like someone who did a carnivore diet for years, who hasn't had any fiber for years, it's going to take them longer than someone like me who still, I would go to Chipotle once in a while. I'd have some beans here, a little bit of fruit there. So at least my body could still tolerate fiber, because the next step is if that's having a positive effect is then you start in with the fiber. So now I have my sprouted steel cut oats with maple. And you start in on some beans, some white beans, some fiber to start evacuating as the liver goes, oh, yay, no new excess fat soluble vitamins are coming in, and then starting to move it out. So why did I say all this? My eyes, 7 weeks, 8 weeks out now? My eyes are still glossy. I even tested this. I had alcohol, like a glass of wine or a margarita, at least 20 or 30 of these days. So I did intentionally drying things to see if my eyes would regress. Now, and I have to say, when I added in extra cheese and dairy, because I was such a dairy queen, when I added extra, I still have cream in my coffee. When I added a lot of the old foods I used to eat tons of eggs, egg yolks, pate, all these things. When I started to add some of those back in, my eyes did get a little funny. I could feel it. And guys, also genetically, I'm different than you. I have a history, both sides of my family, autoimmune disease, like multi-generational, right? So hopefully you don't have to be this weird and careful. But one more thing. Okay, guys, one thing you can't separate in this experiment, here are variables that did not affect my eyes. I had already done circadian sunrise walks for months at a time before that. Even though I was doing that during this period as well, I've done that many times before, no effect on my eyes, right? The amount of screen time, same, not a big difference. I'm reading things on screens all the time, not a difference. The ah the But there was one other change that I can't discount. I stopped a stack of supplements that were all anti-aging supplements that had niacin or niacin related chemicals. That I noticed my hair, that too much niacin stops, it reduces your hair and skin and eyes production of sebum, which is the natural oils that keep the integrity of our hair, which is also why our ancestors hardly ever washed their hair. They could just brush the sebum through the hair to protect the hair, because hair needs oil. It doesn't want soap always stripping out its protection. So why I said that is one thing that definitely could have helped my eye health. But here's the thing. Before this prior year, I was not overdosing on niacin or B related niacinamide, whatever the popular thing is right now. Until this prior year, I was not overdosing on that. But my eyes got really bad this prior year. And I was afraid to drive at night. I was just, my glasses, I just felt it was harder and harder to read. The number of typos, my friends will attest, the number of typos, besides the awful spell checker, the number of typos in my texts would be because I could hardly read what I was typing a lot of the time. And I remember just balancing, constantly having a set of glasses balancing on the top of my head, sticking out of my purse. I would hide my glasses all around so that I could get to them. So what am I saying? I'm saying be really cautious about supplements. Also, sure, enjoy liver once in a while. Don't eat those bad tasting powdered greens. Like, if I just listened to what my body actually, what tastes good, I wouldn't have gotten so extreme. But I had a goal, which is I wanted more minerals. I wanted to be healthier. I wanted to have da 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 da. And so, guys, just don't try too hard. All right. And follow people who are doing experiments that are outside of the settled science. Science is never settled, guys. Keep asking questions. All right. Thanks for listening. Like, comment, share, subscribe, whatever you can do to help. Tell me what you want to, because I'm here for you. Bye.